We have an interesting speaker today. He's the district attorney for Beaver County. He's been DA for 15 years. But when he got out of law school, he went into several branches of the law, but he always seemed to be leaning toward public service. He is a 12-year veteran of the U.S. Army Infantry Officer, helicopter pilot. He's been in Patterson Township Board of Commissioners for 12 years, 10 of which as the president. He teaches Sunday school and goes on many field trips with his church. And in his spare time, he puts the bad guys in Beaver County in jail. Dave? Thank you. Let's give a warm welcome to Dave Lozier.
Good morning. Let me correct one part of the bio. I've been DA for 6 years.
6 years.
6 years, yes. Thank you for the invitation. I used to give a lot of these talks before COVID to schools and to PTOs and to church meetings and women's groups and men's groups all over Beaver County. But COVID just shut everything down. And it's so good to get back with people. And I'm glad to see that you all are back up. This is your second meeting again since after COVID. So congratulations for that. It's good to see churches reopening. Good to see schools reopening. Glad to see it. Something that's important in my life, and Jim knows this, Jim Skall here. Beaver County is a different beast than Allegheny County. The Allegheny County courts shut down for over a year. The DAs were working out of their houses, the Attorney General lawyers were working out of their houses, PDs out of their houses. They had no hearings, no trials. It was by TV or it didn't happen, and a lot of it didn't happen. Part of that was because one of the assistant district attorneys died of COVID very early on. So they all got scared and they just shut down. In our courts, we never closed. The senior judge, the president judge, Judge Mancini, and I were very adamant that if we stopped having hearings, you would never catch up. We have 6,000 criminal cases a year in Beaver County. And I've got 10 full-time assistant district attorneys, a couple of part-time assistant district attorneys, and we have sometimes 100 or 200 criminal hearings of some sort every day of the week. And if you were to shut down, there's only one result. And that's people do not get held accountable. Because eventually, because you can't catch up, you're ignoring small crimes, and then as time goes on, you're ignoring medium crimes, and then eventually you're ignoring big crimes. And the president judge and I weren't willing to have that happen. Jim Skull here assists me in my veterans court in Beaver County, and I figured there'd be a lot of veterans here. I don't usually wear a lapel pin, but because of the group I was coming to, I wanted to make sure that you knew that I respected what some of you have been through. I was a veteran in the Cold War, not a combat. I was post-Vietnam. But I appreciate when you all served, it was a very different time. I'm afraid we're probably going back into that time now. But thank you for your service. So let me talk about my office. It's a strange beast in Pennsylvania. District attorneys wear two hats. You are elected as the primary prosecutor for the case. So when it's Commonwealth versus Johnson, I'm the Commonwealth in the county. So my name is on every indictment. My name is on every criminal complaint. And my staff, we have to process, again, those 6,000 cases a year. And we're responsible for providing justice to those 6,000 defendants and justice to the, say, 4,000 victims. Not every criminal case has a victim, say a DUI where there's no accident or a drug possession charge. There often aren't victims. But I'd say about 75% of the cases, there's a victim. So we represent and try to provide justice to everybody involved in the process. And that's our legal, ethical obligation. Defense lawyer, they have one obligation, and that's to try to put in evidence to get reduced sentence or dismissed. But we have to represent everybody in the room. So in addition to my 12 lawyers that work for me, I also have 4 people in my victim witness office. And they provide support for the victims and the witnesses that come through the courthouse. So every day when I've got, say, 100 hearings going on, we have anywhere from half a dozen to 30 victims sitting in our waiting room. We have a special victim waiting room in my hallway. And the purpose is to provide a safe space for these people to come in, because most of them have never been involved in a court process, let alone a criminal process. Most of the victims, it's a one-off, where they're in a terrible car accident from a DUI, or someone broke into their garage, or there's a physical assault, or there's a child who's a victim. So they come in and they don't know where to go. They don't know where to sit. They don't know who to talk to. They don't know what our role is. They don't know what their rights are. They don't know that we have benefits to help pay for mileage, help pay for food if they have to go to Pittsburgh for medical care, help pay for funeral services, help pay for mental health counseling after some cases. So I've got 4 full-time individuals, and what they do is provide that support to those individuals. And something else we provide, which is kind of unique, there aren't many DAs in the state that do it, we have support dogs. We have a list of over 30 dogs. We don't do support cats, we don't do guinea pigs, we don't do miniature horses. But we have over 30 dogs who rotate through my office, or who we can call, and we can say, we've got a 7-year-old girl who is a victim of an assault, and she's got to come in tomorrow and talk about the event with the detectives, talk about the event with my prosecutors, and prepare either for us to file a complaint or for her to testify. And can you imagine being a young child trying to tell something horrible to other people whom you've never known, and it's something that you don't want to have to remember anyway. So we bring in a big fuzzy lab or a little poodle, or we have every kind of, we have a Great Dane that's almost as tall as I am that comes in, and he is the most gentle beast in the world. But when those dogs come in, and they have to be professionally trained and certified support animals, and they come in, and when they curl up on the floor at the feet of that child or a woman who's been a victim, it just reduces the tension level dramatically for the children and for everybody in the room. And there are even cases where, depending on the judge, that dog can go in the courtroom with the child to again, kind of allow that child to get through what they're going to have to go through and they have to testify. So it's a bizarre office. Again, we handle every kind of criminal case you can imagine. Right now we have a rather high death rate. Most of the counties around the cities are having higher than normal murder rates. Allegheny County is seeing a spike, and we are as well in Little Beaver County. We're not as bad as there were some years in the 90s and the early 2000s where we would have 13 to 15 homicides a year. A couple of years ago, we were averaging 4, 5, 6 a year, and we very well could reach 9 or 10 this year. And they're bizarre homicides after COVID. The mental health impacts are tremendous. We have individuals who, as you all know, there's no mental health support system right now. If you are struggling with depression or schizophrenia or neuroses of some sort, there's no place where you can go and be kept safe. Our society has closed, I think 2 or 3 of the mental health hospitals. So you're out in the streets. So when COVID hits, they closed the treatment facilities, the outpatient facilities. Hospitals were consumed with COVID. Your mental health counselor wasn't seeing people. The drug addiction counselors weren't seeing people. Al-Anon and AA weren't meeting in the vast majority of circumstances. So the people in our society that were susceptible to crisis were abandoned because of COVID. So we had a dramatic increase in everything you can imagine. We had an increase in overdoses, increase of overdose deaths. We had a dramatic increase in mental health incidents that resulted in 302s, whereas we used to average 1 mental health barricaded suspect a year, where you have a person who is threatening the world, threatening themselves, lock themselves in the house, I've got a gun, and my SWAT team's got to go out. We used to have 1 a year, if 1 a year. We've had 6 this year. We had 1 week, 2 weeks ago I had 6 SWAT events in 1 week. And the bulk of those are mental health incidents. So the result is you have violent events, you have thefts, but a lot of it is just families at the end of their rope, which results in domestic violence increases, car accidents, and of course overdoses and those sorts of things. But the homicides this year have been mental health homicides. We have occasional, we have gangs. We have an issue in, again, Pittsburgh and Beaver County where you have a number of young men with guns, and nobody hits anybody with a fist anymore. Nobody goes outside behind the bar and has a fist fight. Now they pull out a gun. So we've had a number of those. But a lot of the homicides have been mental health homicides, where you have a son killing father, you have a wife killing husband, mother killing children. half of our homicides this year so far, and a lot of our aggravated assault cases have been within families under severe mental health crisis. So COVID has impacted us a lot. And that's why we didn't close. That's where I started here. That's why we didn't close the courthouse, because you have to have accountability. And a lot of what we do, as Jim knows, is when a criminal event happens, the first time they come into the courthouse, you're making an assessment on the severity of the case. Is there a victim? What's the accountability that society demands? And can treatment be part of the solution? I have a mental health background from college. And so when I came in, it wasn't so much from a law enforcement police viewpoint. It's, can we fix somebody? So we make sure that we have mental health assets and drug treatment and alcohol treatment available for the people who are there for the first time. If we can fix somebody and come up with a solution where maybe they're on probation for a year or two, but a condition of that is that they've got to go through parent classes, or they've got to go through mental health treatment, or they have to attend consistently drug and alcohol treatment and accomplish certain measures, which we go through, then if it's their first time offense and if it's a minor misdemeanor, I'll dismiss the case. Because I'd rather we try to fix that person the first time in the door than to end up with a misdemeanor that maybe was a one-off event that otherwise would stay with them for the rest of their lives, because it's difficult to expunge records in Pennsylvania. It's getting easier, but it's difficult. So staying open during COVID also allowed us to make sure that we got the mental health care out there and the drug and alcohol treatment out there that we otherwise would not have been able to do if we just closed the doors. So I wear two hats, I started to say. In addition to being the chief prosecutor, the other half of my job by statute is I'm the chief law enforcement officer in the county. That's the designation. Now, that means the police don't work for me, right? In Beaver County, I've got 52, and we have 170,000 people, so it's a fraction of Allegheny. We have 52 and a half municipalities. The half is Elwood City. Half of Elwood City is in Lawrence, and half of Elwood City is in Beaver County. So you have 52 and a half municipalities. And they range from about 80 people up to 8,000 or 9,000. Some of our cities that used to be very big, Beaver Falls, Aliquippa, have smaller populations. So we have 52 and a half municipalities. We've got 35 police departments. Now, you know the size of our towns. So you know the size of our police departments. So what my job is in that regard is to provide the logistical support, the political support for these police departments so they can do their jobs. So what do you do with a small police department? We have police departments that consist of one full-time officer and maybe one or two part-time officers. We have a number of police departments that have 3 or 4 full-timers, and then they rely on a number of part-time police officers to fill that schedule. But it's the identity of these small towns of 700 or 800 people who, one of the last things they have as a town is they've got a volunteer fire department with no members, no one to drive the truck. And they've got a police department because the schools were consolidated back in the 70s. They don't have much of an identity in these towns anymore. But they've got their police department and they won't give it up. The problem is a small police department can't provide the modern level of service that 2021 demands. So what I try to do is we provide training at a county level where my 8 detectives and we schedule training for all the forensics, homicide investigation, sexual assault investigation, drug investigation, car stops, mental health issues. We provide as much training for free as we possibly can within the county. Where we'll bring in the FBI, we'll bring outside experts, or we'll have local people teach. But the goal is to try to provide free training for these departments. Number one, they have to have a certain number of credits every year, but also just to keep them updated, because the law is continually changing. Problem is with a small police department, they can't spare anybody to go to training. Think of having 4 police officers trying to man a 24-hour schedule in your community. A lot of you own businesses, a lot of you scheduled people. How do you manage a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week schedule with 4 people? You can't. You can't. So they don't. You end up with people doing double shifts. You end up people doing 12 and 16-hour shifts on a regular basis. You end up filling holes with somebody who probably shouldn't be a police officer, but nobody else will work for $12 an hour, has been fired from 12 different departments. So you fill the gaps. And when you do have a training, you can't send your detective to Harrisburg for a week, Indian Town Gap, to learn about modern forensics. You can't send someone to my class for 2 days to learn about proper collection of video evidence or how to use a body-worn camera. You can't spare somebody off the streets for 4 hours or 8 hours. You can't spare someone to qualify with their pistol. So while we're going through this crisis of small departments, we also have the anti-police movement, which is another side effect of 2020. 2020 brought us lots of wonderful things. So you have people right now who think, and this is not a small problem. There are a lot of people that all of a sudden don't trust police. Post 9/11, everybody supported first responders. Everybody supported the police. Everybody supported firemen. Everybody would say hello to their police officers. They really supported us. 180-degree change in the last 2 years. No one's going to the police academy. Nobody wants to work for $12, $13, $14 an hour in a job where you got to wear a bulletproof vest, carry mace, a sidearm, and confront people with mental health crises. Would you do that for $12 an hour when you can work at a big box store for 14 or 15? So how are you going to get it used to be that you wanted police officers to have a college degree, right? You want to have a 4-year degree. You aren't getting those officers right now. They're not graduating from the academy. And the few that are graduating from the academy can't fill the gaps that we have in our departments. So we've got a crisis in law enforcement across the country, not just Beaver County, it's all across law enforcement. So what used to be for the 90s and the 2000s, say you had four police officers in your department, you'd have half dozen or 8 part-time officers. And they'd come in and they work 3 shifts a month, and that part-time officer would work for maybe 3 or 4 other departments. And the police chief spent half his time scheduling. Well, Bob can work for me on Thursdays at midnight because he's working at Chippewa Wednesdays at midnight, and he's working for Freedom Tuesdays at midnight. And they're swapping all these part-time officers who are making $12, $13, $14 an hour, don't have medical benefits, and don't have a pension. They don't exist anymore. Those officers are going away very rapidly. They're finding other things to do with their lives. And again, they're not coming out of the academies. When they do come out of the academy, they're going to work somewhere part-time for 6 months. Say Aliquippa or Beaver Falls or Center Township are going to hire them. They're going to spend a couple $1,000s buying the belt, buying a vest that fits, having them ride with an experienced officer for 6 months or so, giving them experience, and then they get them out Lebanon for $70,000 a year. Or they come down to Leetsdale, where again, you're going to make twice as much working in any of the large townships in Allegheny County. Or we have a couple of townships that pay much better, but not what you're going to get in some of the townships in Allegheny County. So we don't have the police to fill these police departments anymore. So we've had small departments, too many municipalities, no more part-time officers. At the same time, you have an anti-police movement that's demanding higher quality training and higher quality officers. You all have heard discussions. They want every officer to have a body-worn camera. You know what that costs? You're not going to put a body-worn camera on every officer in a department with 6 officers for less than $15,000. And then you're going to spend thousands of dollars a year maintaining the storage in the cloud and the technical backup. And when are you going to take the time to train these guys how to use them? So, and you also want to have training on diversity and mental health issues and drug addiction, which everyone is demanding right now because they think that the police are being brutal and that the police don't care anymore, which of course isn't true, and it wasn't true. But the pressure on the departments to provide that higher quality training, they just can't do it. So a couple of our measures, in addition to providing free training for as many departments as we can, we're trying to provide logistical tools to save them time. One of the measures which we're doing is we're installing, we kind of copied this from DA Zappala here, the automatic license plate reading cameras at intersections. I'm a radical right-wing constitutionalist. I don't like the violation of privacy. I don't like when the government comes in and takes information or tracks you. I try to adamantly defend my rights and the rights of my citizens. But the license plate cameras are an incredible tool to help law enforcement. I don't know if you've seen little bits and pieces of it in the news about Allegheny County's program, but you see a lot of it on TV if you watch these crazy crime shows. What happened was back in 2016, there was a U.S. Open at Oakmont Country Club, probably a couple of golfers in here. So in a post-9/11 world, Secret Service comes in and talks to Pittsburgh and talks to the Allegheny County Detective Bureau and Oakmont to make sure they have enough security for a major event in case there's a terrorist attack at a golf tournament. And they told them you need cameras on the intersections in case something happens. So Zappala spends a couple $100,000 to put cameras in like 3 or 4 intersections in the vicinity of Oakmont Country Club. These are cameras. They're not red light cameras. They're not speeding cameras. All they do is they take a snapshot of the rear of every vehicle that goes through an intersection. And that image goes into a database and establishes a spreadsheet with make and model of car, time and date it goes through the intersection. It went north on Route 65 at Edgeworth, and it had a Pennsylvania plate with this data on it. We have an image, and we have that data. So Zappala put a couple of those in down around Oakmont, just because the Secret Service made them do it. Within a couple of weeks, they were solving major crime after major crime after major crime by having this information available. So he worked with some Beaver County high-tech wizards with a high security and computer background and developed a website and a database. And now we have these cameras in a 6-county network. We have Washington, Westmoreland, Beaver, Butler, Allegheny, and Mercer. So far, Lawrence isn't playing. What happens, so the DA goes into municipalities, and you pick choke points. For example, the first choke points I did was we did 4th Street at Ambridge at the hardware store in 65, and across the river at the Aliquippa-Ambridge Bridge. So you put in a couple of cameras. So let's say there's a bank robbery at Northern Light Shopping Center. And Huntington Bank, and they say, yeah, the guy fled in a green pickup truck. Well, it used to take tremendous amount of investigation time to find witnesses, to find cameras at the drugstore, the Giant Eagle. It took a lot of time to find information on the pickup truck, where it was going, who may have been driving it. And we don't have the time for those investigations anymore. We don't have the police to do those investigations anymore. So if I can save a department 30 hours of overtime, so now he can identify that pickup truck in about 15 minutes. And we can find a bank robber in 15 minutes. We can solve a car theft. I've solved 2 homicides within a couple of hours because I had a camera within a couple of blocks. We screened every vehicle that went through that camera, through that intersection, and we end up identifying, oh, here's the green pickup truck. We tracked it going south on 65. So then we go to the license plate reader, we get the license plate, or I can say there were 6 green pickup trucks that were in the vicinity in a 3-hour period. I show the bank teller. Which pickup truck is it? It was that one with a Penn State sticker in the back window. Now, I've got the license plate, I got a Penn State bumper sticker, and half the time, I've got a picture of the face of the driver. I can tell you what was in the bed of the pickup truck. So we're solving these major crimes on the day they happen, which when you have small departments that can't afford that investigation time as crime levels increase, that's an incredible tool. So I spend about half, I pay about half of the cost of installing them, and I find donors, businesses. Like we just put cameras the whole length of 65 at major intersections, 65 all the way up to the YMCA in New Brighton, all the way up to the Turnpike. I'm paying about half the price, and we're finding local businesses to pay the other half the installation price. Or I use a local business to provide the internet connection for those cameras, just again to save the department $1,200 a year in internet connections. So we're providing major tools to the police, and the result is we're solving major crimes faster. To give you an example, we had a carjacking up in Newcastle about 2 weeks ago, where a guy walked up, stole a car from like an 82-year-old woman in Newcastle. It was a very violent event. They knew they had a car description, they had a description of him, but they had nothing else on the guy. The next morning, about 7 in the morning, a farmer's wife up in North Sewickley, up behind New Brighton, says, there's a guy sleeping in a car in my driveway. So the chief of police, who's the one on duty at 7 o'clock in the morning in North Sewickley, goes driving over just to investigate this guy sleeping in the car. The guy wakes up, sees the police car, puts the car in gear, and goes zooming down the highway towards New Brighton. You can't chase a car at high speed in the country. You end up, he has an accident, you have an accident, you can't keep up, you don't know where he's going. That's a failed enterprise. But the chief calls in a description. He calls in like Silver Sentra, a partial license plate, and he's fleeing down Route 168 towards New Brighton, 588 towards New Brighton. New Brighton has cameras. So within a couple seconds, New Brighton goes on the computer in their car, enters the license plate, the car description. We found out everywhere that car's been overnight in Beaver County. We find out, and they're tracking the car as it goes through Beaver Falls, through New Brighton, up Route 51 to the Chippewa Walmart. We find him, we find the car. Within 15 minutes of him leaving the farmer's driveway in North Sewickley, we find the car sitting in the Walmart parking lot in Chippewa. So we close the road, and one of my detectives walks in plain clothes and finds the guy checking out with a grocery cart in Walmart. Major violent crime solved, no one else injured, very quickly. So that's a tool which all the district attorneys in Western Pennsylvania are working together to provide to our smaller departments. An incredible tool. Another thing we're trying to do is to regionalize police departments. For years, you've had the tendency with a small town, you have a couple choices in Pennsylvania. As a small town, you can close your doors and say the state police are going to cover my municipality. Well, we're all taxpayers. So you end up with a township, Hempfield Township, I believe out in Westmoreland County, has no police department. They get it free from us as Pennsylvania taxpayers. So they've got, it's such a big, it's probably the population of Beaver Falls, New Brighton, Aliquippa, and Hopewell Township combined. And they've got no police department. So the state police have a barracks in that township just to provide police, because Hempfield won't step up to the plate and pay for policing. You have a lot of small towns with 300, 400, 500 people that can't afford a department, so they closed the doors years ago and they let the state police provide policing. Problem is, the state police don't have anybody either. The state police have no one going to the academy. The state police have people retiring far faster than they have people entering the police department. So the state police, great department, well-trained, but they don't have anybody in the car. So Beaver County, I average 2 state police cars during the day. Sometimes I have 2 at night for my entire county. So when something happens, that car may be sitting up at Raccoon Township, and then there's a call from Marion Township up on the Lawrence County line. 90-minute response time? That's not policing. And that's not because the state police are doing anything wrong. It's that municipalities don't have the police to cover the situation. And getting free police from the state police isn't the answer either. So that's one option. Have no police, rely on the state. Another option, which you can do, is you can do a contract. We have a lot of municipalities that are very small. I think a lot of the municipalities around Leetsdale a number of years ago consolidated down here. Used to have about 4 or 5, maybe 6 different police departments. Now they contract with one department. That's a common solution, where you end up with a one department. For example, we have New Brighton that contracts to provide policing to Doherty, Pulaski, and some others. The problem is the politics of contracting. You have New Brighton, which may provide great policing for those townships at a great contract price, but maybe you end up with a mayor or someone on council who doesn't like the police chief this year. Maybe the police chief stopped his wife. So he wants to get rid of the contracted police department. So you have a member of council or a mayor. The next time that contract comes up, they cancel the contract. Or maybe Rochester Township, who's next door to Pulaski and Doherty and New Brighton, maybe they're short of funds. Maybe they need bodies. So they underbid New Brighton next time it comes up. So they get the contract. And they can hire 1 or 2 more police officers. So you end up with townships and small boroughs. They're going back and forth like ping pong balls, which means you don't have police who know your municipality. It's bad enough with police officers who are part-time, who don't know where 4th Street is in whatever town you live in, because they work in so many departments and they move around so much. No pensions, they're underpaid, no benefits, so they move around a lot, so they don't know your department. But then when you got departments changing hands and responsibility on a frequent basis, they don't know your town. So that's a great disadvantage. So what we're trying to do is to adopt a model of regionalizing police departments. The best example out here in Western Pennsylvania is Northern Regional Department up in Northern Allegheny County. They regionalized, originally I think 3 municipalities, now I think there are 4 municipalities, back in the early 90s. They've been together forever. So you end up with a department of about 15 police officers that covers multiple municipalities, and they're the equivalent of a governmental body. You have a charter. You end up with, say you have 1 or 2 representatives from each municipality on the board, and they have a financial obligation to provide this department, or this municipality may pay 33% of the budget, this one may pay 27%, this one may pay 15%, depending on the size and the population, the road miles. Come up with a formula. But you end up with a standard municipality, a standard police department, with more officers. That you have to have at least 10 officers to manage a 24-hour schedule. You still have a chief, a deputy chief, a detective, and cover a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, at least 10 full-time officers. You can do that when you get municipalities to talk to each other and to work together. You can't do that through contracting, and you cannot do it with the small departments with 800 people. So we're in the process right now of working with the entire length of Route 65 along the Ohio River. We may end up with Freedom, Baden, Harmony, and Conway all together as one region. End up with about 15 police officers rather than like 17 that they have now. But right now, picture 4 municipalities that touch each other. 4 municipalities that are all trying to cover their schedule for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. 3 o'clock on a Sunday morning, you got 4 police cars on the road. You got 4 policemen on the road, all being underpaid with low benefit rates. 4 policemen, 4 police cars at 3 o'clock in the morning with no calls. What are you doing? You can take those 4 municipalities, Baden, Conway, Freedom, Harmony. You can put them inside Hopewell Township and have the same number of people, the same land area. They've got 2 cars out. The efficiencies of regionalizing are incredible. Fewer cars, more qualified officers. You can surge when you need to. You can send people out for training. That's it. So that's a major issue we're going through right now. We're trying to consolidate regions along the Beaver River. So picture a department from Bridgewater, New Brighton, Beaver Falls, all the way up to Copp with the Ohio line. About eight municipalities in that stretch. You can get there in 10 minutes. But why do we have 4 departments covering 8 municipalities? When you can reach any of those, any location of those municipalities in a matter of minutes. So we're trying to, again, provide you, as a resident, better quality policing, better trained police, because when you do that, you can afford body-worn cameras. You can afford to have a shift sergeant to supervise that rookie fresh out of the academy. Instead of hiring someone from the academy who's never been a police officer, put him in a car, go be a police officer. You can't do that in 2021 without exposing yourself as a municipality to incredible liability, exposing the officer, and exposing the citizen to dangerous situations. So we've got to find a way in Western Pennsylvania to solve this problem. All the DAs are working on the same thing. We've all got to figure out a way to provide better quality, more efficient policing for our municipalities. Regionalization is one option. We're trying to make that happen. Okay. I've talked for 45 minutes. What didn't I cover that you guys thought, oh, I thought the DA would talk about this? Yes, sir. The piano player. Joe, what can I do for you?
I noted that Minneapolis is going to go to a new system, apparently eliminating the police department, and I wondered what your thoughts were on the possibility of success for something like that.
They're rehiring police up there.
No, well, there aren't any police left. Who wants to work for Minneapolis? It's outrageous. We have, the other option is they talk about when somebody calls the police, send a mental health person out first. What are you going to pay the mental health person? Do they show up with a radio and a bulletproof vest? And this person who went through college, maybe got a master's degree in sociology or psychology, can they handle the 300-pound gorilla who doesn't want to talk, who wants to beat people? When one thing I've done is, in one of my other hats, because I'm the chief law enforcement officer, I also run the SWAT team. I think Patrick wanted me to talk about that at some point, but I run the SWAT team. In most counties, either you rely on the state police or you've got a municipality big enough to have a SWAT team. Lawrence County, they got Newcastle, they got their SWAT team. Butler, they have the Butler City that provides a SWAT team. Beaver County, we have no place big enough to run a SWAT team, so I do it. So I use my drug funds, the stuff we seize from the bad guys, and I've got right now, it's probably the best SWAT team in southwestern Pennsylvania, second only to one of the Pittsburgh units. I've got 30 full-time police officers from 15 different departments who train 8 hours twice a month. We go out 40 times a year on average in Little Beaver County. These are search warrants with guys or girls with weapons issues or barricaded mental health subjects, which is how I got here. My SWAT team, when my SWAT team goes out, I've got at least one registered psychologist or clinician in my SWAT command vehicle and negotiators to deal with that person. Because when you show up at a SWAT event, if that guy doesn't come out the door, or if you can't go in the door because there are wife and kids inside, you want someone who can talk to the individual. And most of the times, they've got a mental health history. alcohol and drug history. So I've got someone in the room who's got access to all the crisis information, the mental health information on that person, and can tell us this person responds badly to this person has these contacts. And we negotiate, we get those people out. We've been very successful by having mental health people, but beside them is a guy with a gun. And that's what Minneapolis isn't going to have. You've got to have police to keep that mental health person safe. Because it isn't one answer or the other. You have to recognize that there's a mental health issue, but there's also a violence public safety issue. You've got to have both.
Okay, here.
Yes, sir.
Several questions and a comment. First of all, what's the size of your budget?
If I include the 30 full-time personnel on my court side, 50 part-timers between my drug unit, the Heidi unit, my SWAT team, is about $4 million.
Do you run the jails?
No. The county runs a jail. We have a 400-person jail, and because of better mental health treatment and better drug treatment, I've reduced the inmate population by about 25% in the last 4 years. So just the violent people are sitting in jail.
And the other thing is a comment. My understanding is the state legislature changed the law that Hempfield actually has to pay a substantial amount of money to get state police coverage. Is that true?
No.
Okay. They still get free state police? Okay.
Every year, the Democrat strongholds and Republican strongholds in places like Beaver County stand up and say it's not right that Hempfield and my Green Township and my Hanover Township are getting policing for free, and Hempfield's getting policing for free. The problem is the state Senate is controlled by people from the northern tier. You have a lot of rural counties which have maybe one police department in the county seat. And the rest of the county, you're talking Tioga. You go across Elk, McKean, all those counties, the whole northern 2/3 of the state, they all rely on the state police. And do you think those townships up there around Ridgeway are going to want to pay for the state police coverage? It's never passed. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Pennsylvania is one of the few states in the country that doesn't use the county police as the main police force. I can't figure that out. That seemed like that would would be a good consolidation right there.
Yes. Although I'm from Western Pennsylvania, my family's all from Mount Pleasant, Westmoreland County, but I'm an Army brat. My dad was a West Pointer. We traveled all over the country, all over the world as kids. We lived in a dozen different states as kids. And everywhere you went, you had county police departments. You had county schools. You had county roads. Pennsylvania and Illinois are unique. Louisiana is a little bit different. But here, what we've got is we're paying the price of having William Penn as our founder. William Penn was a radical Democrat, meaning small d. He wanted as little government at the top as you could and maximum control of the citizen at the bottom. So when we were drafted as a Commonwealth, every municipality is completely independent. Little Hookstown, with 85 people, does what it darn well pleases. It can have a fire department, a police department, or nothing. And we can't tell them what to do. And until the legislature stands up like they did in the early 70s and say, we're going to consolidate schools, we're going to consolidate police and consolidate fire, the legislature just hasn't stepped up to the plate. But you're right, it makes no sense.
Scotch Irish. That's true.
Those were our founders, yes. Yeah, the old farmers, yes. Yeah. Anybody else? Jim? Yeah.
What helicopter did you fly?
I was post-Vietnam, so I came in flying primarily Hueys. And it was a great experience. I was a brand new second lieutenant coming out of the box. First unit was in Korea, flew a year in the beautiful mountains and snows of Korea. But the beauty was all of my warrant officers had like 10,000 hours of combat flight time in Vietnam. So I did not run my platoon. I listened a lot to a lot of the Vietnam veteran combat pilots. I started out in Hueys, and then if anyone here was in the service, a lot of you are, you don't make a whole lot of choices. And the military is among the worst in personnel management. So after spending about 3 years in Hueys, the Army spent the money to train me in Black Hawk helicopters. So I go to Fort Rucker, Alabama, spend 8 months learning how to fly Black Hawk helicopters. Then the Army put me back in the Huey unit. Typical, okay? Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Next week's speaker is Ed Heidick, who is the superintendent of the Cemetery of the Alleghenies.
Thank you.